Welcome to the recorded version of Advanced Planning for People with Dementia, Legal Services Voucher Program in Delaware and New Consumer Planning Guides from August 8, 2017, part of the National Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Center webinar series sponsored by the Administration for Community Living.
Welcome everyone to the webinar today on Advanced Planning for People with Dementia. In this webinar series, the Administration for Community Living's National Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Center has partnered with the American Society on Aging. Today's presentation focuses on the Legal Services Voucher Program in Delaware and new consumer planning guides developed by the National Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Center. Before we start the presentations, Erin Long of the Administration for Community Living will provide a brief welcome. Erin?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We are very excited to share with you the work that's going on in Delaware, as well as the new tools that have been created through the wonderful work at the Resource Center. We appreciate your time and hope that you find this presentation to be very useful for you in your work. Thanks again, and back to you, Sari.
For today's webinar, we will be hearing from Julie Miller, Patty Justice, and Stephanie Hughes. Julie Miller is a planner with the Delaware Division of Services for Aging and Adults with Physical Disabilities, where she works to develop policies and practices to support Delaware's aging and disability communities, focusing on dementia, legal services, and the state plan on aging. Patty Justice is an executive assistant and legal services developer at the Delaware Division of Services for Aging and Adults with Physical Disabilities as well, where she focuses on a number of issues, including regulations, legislation, and membership on the Governor's Commission and the Delaware Guardianship Commission. And finally, Stephanie Hughes is a research analyst at RTI International and works in ACL's National Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Center. Stephanie provides technical assistance to 11 of our Alzheimer's grantees and contributes to dementia-related research projects and supports program evaluation and reporting for those grantees. Without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Julie and Patty to start our presentation, and then they will turn things over to Stephanie to wrap it up. Go ahead.
Great, thanks, Sari. Hi, everyone. First, I just wanted, this is Julie Miller from DSAAPD, or the Division of Services for Aging and Adults with Physical Disabilities, and I'm just going to give a brief overview of what our division is and the population that we serve. So we are Delaware's state unit of aging, and we also function as a statewide agency on aging. We are the central advocate for aging and adults with physical disabilities in Delaware, and we are housed within the Department of Health and Social Services, which is a cabinet-level umbrella agency where there are 11 divisions. We have also divisions besides us. We have divisions that focus on mental health and substance abuse, public health, and a variety of other divisions. Our division, DSAAPD, employs over 1,000 people, including staff in 2 state-operated healthcare facilities. So, I also want to take a look at our aging population. Delaware has 3 counties, and then we also have less than 1 million people encompassing all 3 counties. The southernmost county, with less services than most, has seen an influx of retirees with limited caregiver support. This has posed a problem for our division as we work to secure better resources for the unique challenges of the population. Our older population is growing rapidly. We currently have 1 in 5 Delawareans over the age of 60 in the state. And by 2020, that is projected to make up 1/4 of all Delawareans. We have a major increase in the demand for services with limited resources. We're also expecting around 17,000 Delawareans 65 and older living with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia, and that is expected to grow by 35% by 2025. That's one of the reasons why we looked towards creating the Alzheimer's Disease Initiative. The goal of this project is to fill the gaps of Delaware's dementia-capable system of long-term services and supports to better meet the needs of persons with Alzheimer's disease and related disorders, or ADRD, and their caregivers. And this initiative is funded through ACL's Alzheimer's Disease Initiative Specialized Supportive Services Grant. Some of the activities of the grant include a pilot sensory technology program, caregiver training and consultation in the Savvy Caregiver program, respite vouchers for caregivers, community integration services for people with ADRD, We partner dementia competency training with the Alzheimer's Association and what we're here to talk about today, the Expanded Legal Services Program. So in today's webinar, participants will be able to identify 4 levels in the spectrum of legal capacity, list major legal issues that come up in advanced planning and end-of-life decision-making options, identify the purpose and importance of legal service voucher program, as well as identify steps to develop a dementia-specific legal training. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Patty, who's going to explain some of the legal planning options in Delaware.
Thank you, Julie. Hi, everybody. All right, next slide. As you'll see, we just have some comments so everybody can think about that. First, we have a lovely quote from Winston Churchill. Let our advanced worrying become advanced thinking and planning. So use the stressing out to actually focus it on something positive. Another item that many people think about or don't think about that should is people do not plan on failing. However, they do fail to plan at times. So if a person has been diagnosed with an ADRD or are in the early stages, they should immediately consider what their future plans and desires should be. It may be the right time to put structure in place to help support their lifestyles and affairs and how they want to be making decisions moving forward in their life. Next slide, we look at why did Delaware focus on legal services and why in this area of dementia-related issues. First, we identified that legal services are an unmet need among many people with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. Legal services are often seen as complex and hard to navigate. There were not that many affordable options here in Delaware as we looked into this topic. And attorneys were not seen as well versed in the needs of people with Alzheimer's or related dementias. You know, lawyers are always so well welcomed in every aspect, so we wanted to try and look at that as a way we can bridge that gap. As well as when you look at legal services, you want to have family dynamics and not wanting to recognize that this is even something that's going on. You know, there's always a sense of denial, and having to deal with this and making people have to focus on the future and not to just what's going on in their immediate needs as they're dealing with this new diagnosis. All right, moving on to the next slide. While we saw that as a gap and why we wanted to focus on it, we also see what the importance of it, and we wanted to stress that, of legal planning. While it can be a scary aspect to look at, if you plan early enough, it gives you the best chances when you're dealing with this to have the most participation in legal decisions for as long as possible. It can eliminate stress among families. It helps focus them on how to look at things in a positive manner as best as it can be in these situations. Advanced legal planning can help guard against future elder abuse or exploitation of people with dementia. In fact, we note that Delaware has seen an increase in financial exploitation among family members. So it's good to plan to try and prevent that whenever possible. It also helps, as you go through that process, to connect with other resources that may be available to the person with this diagnosis and their caregivers. It really can open people's eyes. Next slide. Okay, so what are we looking at when we were looking at this, the services that we wanted to provide? So the initiative would look at some of the basic planning that people who've been diagnosed might want to look into. Estate planning, as we call it, which includes wills and trusts so that property can be distributed and protected as needed or as wanted, and Medicaid applications. There's also a lot regarding decision-making options. Here in Delaware, we have recently enacted the supported decision-making legislation, which is a new concept in many locations, and Delaware is only the second state to enact such legislation. We also have a surrogate decision-making. This is basically when a person doesn't have a decision maker, they can no longer make their own decisions, and someone is named for them based on what the surrogate statute indicates is the line of individuals available for that. Again, this is for medical issues only. Next would be your advanced healthcare directive. These are things where individuals can name who they want to make medical decisions for them, so it gets a preparation in advance as to who's going to make those decisions when the individual cannot make them any longer for themselves. And then we have the power of attorney. This focuses, again, on having someone else make decisions for you, more so in non-medical financial type of issues. Next would be guardianship. Again, this is when someone can no longer make decisions on their own, and the court determines that they are unable to care for themselves or really able to make decisions for themselves, and someone is named for them to make those decisions. And then we also have something that's fairly new to Delaware, it's only a few years old, is the Delaware Medical Orders for Scope of Treatment. So those are, again, when someone knows that they are in their last stages of life but still have capacity and can then name what type of treatment they wish to have towards the end of their life. And then, of course, in regarding all of these decision-making options, we have to explore and look at the spectrum of capacity, which we'll be addressing shortly. Next slide. We have a chart over the next several slides, which really is what we wanted to put together that allows people to show the comparison of decision-making options in Delaware. So I described them briefly in the previous slide, but this chart, as we'll go through, kind of indicates more specifics on how each one relates to the other in different types of categories. The categories we decided to break it down to is like who can complete the form itself, the type of document it is, how it relates to the different life issues, medical or legal versus financial, that this may affect, as well as the intended population, the signatures required, the appointment of the authorized representative, and the statutes that relate to those, the role of the representative or the agent, and then, of course, the termination of that item. So the next, as we go through slides, you'll see for each of those particular categories, we have brought out the supported decision-making, surrogate decision-making, the advanced healthcare directive, power of attorney, guardianship, and Delaware's medical orders for scope of treatment, also known as the DMOST. So we can go through those a little bit. We don't want to bore you with all the specific details, but a lot of these, such as like the supported decision maker, again, is new legislation for Delaware. It does not require an attorney to create the form, but it is helpful to have that type of assistance when looking at what the person's responsibilities and all of these specifics that the statute requires. Again, it requires witnesses, and the most important part, I think, that we all stress regarding the supported decision maker is that the individual completing it has capacity to make decisions, and they are just naming someone to assist them in making decisions. So they are not giving up any of the authority to make decisions to anyone else. They retain that for themselves, which is different compared to the other items as we go through the surrogate decision maker. This is a situation in like a medical situation where the individual has been determined by their physician that they lack capacity. Therefore, with the help of the physician, they name an individual who would be the person to serve and make decisions for the individual for medical decisions. Again, the list of people who are eligible for making such decisions is designated in the statute. So the individual can no longer make decisions, and so a surrogate is named for them. Similar to that, an advanced healthcare directive also has a person named for them for medical decisions. However, this is when the adult has made an indication prior to losing capacity to whom they wish to have make those decisions. So it is made well in advance of what this may have. And we highly recommend that everybody have such a document in place. as well as the next one where you, again, the adult, while they have capacity, name someone else to make decisions for them, which is called a power of attorney related to more financial type of options. Then you move on to guardianship. Again, this is through a court process, and the individual is determined by the court. Here in Delaware is the Court of Chancery, that they can no longer make decisions on their own, and a guardian is named for them to make those decisions, both regarding medical and their property. And here in Delaware, we also have recently enacted medical orders for scope of treatment, the most. And this is individuals, it really relates only to individuals with less than 1 year to live, and an individual can then name who they wish to make decisions and how they want their treatment to be moving forward in these last year of life. All right. Next, I'm going to go, this is the big legal stuff here. We got the capacity spectrum. We try to break this down because a lot of people, attorneys as well as others, may indicate, well, now someone's been diagnosed with dementia, they no longer have capacity, which is absolutely not true. There is a spectrum of capacity, and we try to make it as easy. This is a complicated topic, but we try to break it down as much as possible. So you'll notice, hopefully, on the slides here, we do have it color-coded to hopefully make it as easy as possible to understand what we're trying to address. Here you see in the immediate dark green, and then it goes to light green, yellow, and red. That reminds you of a stoplight at the intersection? Well, good, because that's where we're trying to get to. Because where we start with is the green, no impairment of capacity. Therefore, there's no restrictions on what decision-making that individual has. So they're making decisions, they're executing documents, we're all good, let them go for what they need. But then it comes a time where they may have some impairment, which could affect their capacity. So we want to not quite go through the intersection, we got to maybe slow down a little bit. So there's still no restriction on decision-making. They can still execute documents, even if they have some impairment. So just makes you want to slow down and make sure you understand things. But there's no restriction on decision-making. And then we move on to even situations where there is significant impairment of capacity. That's our yellow. You definitely want to slow down before you enter that intersection because you want to look at what that person understands at that point in time. And until they cannot understand the nature and effect of what they're doing, they still may execute certain legal documents. So just because someone has significant impairment should not stop them from being able to handle the affairs that they can still understand. The next one is our red. Again, we need to stop. This is where someone lacks the decision-making capacity because they just do not have an understanding of the nature and effect of what they be doing. Again, this is where you'll need documentation, there's legal documents, the Court of Chancery may be involved, and this is where you need to stop and say this person does not understand the nature and effect of what's going on around them, and then we need to assist and have someone else make decisions for them. So, moving on from there, hope you found that helpful. I am now going to pass it back over to Julie as she goes more into detail of our specific legal voucher program.
Thanks, Patty. As you can see, the options as well as capacity can be confusing for a layperson, especially someone dealing with a dementia diagnosis. This is why our division, DSAAPD, developed the Legal Voucher Program. The Legal Voucher Program allows people diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or related disorders to see a Delaware barred attorney so that they can plan for their future legal needs. It also allows the caregiver ease of mind as their loved one ages and progresses in their dementia diagnosis. Eligible participants receive a voucher worth $275, the amount for about an hour meeting or consultation with an eligible attorney. Eligibility for participants include Delawareans diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias and nothing else. There is no financial barrier or anything. They just have to be citizens of Delaware and have the dementia diagnosis. In order to receive a voucher, participants must visit one of Delaware's 6 caregiver resource centers. These caregiver resource centers are funded through our division and are located throughout the state of Delaware, usually in a senior center or community center. And they provide not only resources such as the Legal Voucher Program, but they also do several other things for caregivers and people that are aging or who have physical disabilities. So they're a great resource here in Delaware. Participants for the Legal Voucher Program are also given a list of eligible attorneys that they can go visit, and we have attorneys all over the state participating in it, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So upon receiving a voucher, participants fill out a pre-service questionnaire, and as well as when they finish the program, they fill out a post-service questionnaire. So the pre-service questionnaire really is collecting demographic information about the individual receiving the service, in addition to why they would like to receive the legal service. So we're asking them things like, you know, are they health and long-term care planning? Are they financial or property planning? Do they need help making end-of-life decisions? Things like that. And so it really gives us an idea of what these vouchers are going to be used for. We contracted with an evaluator through this grant to help us come up with those survey questions, and they're the ones that are going to be evaluating it. All the questionnaires are filled out online through SurveyMonkey, and if people don't have online access, they can fill it out through their phone with the representative from the Caregiver Resource Center. So it's really helpful for us to be able to collect this kind of information because we're going to be evaluating the program to see once this grant is over if it's something that we'd like to continue doing. The post questionnaire, I have an example of it on the slide right here, and that really is seeing how satisfied the individual was with the service that they received from the attorney. We really want to see if the partnership that we have with the attorneys is successful, as well as did it meet the legal needs of the individuals that are going to them. We've done a lot of training with the attorneys, which I'll talk about in the next slide, in order to prepare them to work with this clientele. Even though most of the attorneys already do estate planning, they weren't exactly trained in dementia. And so we wanted to make sure that before this program started, that we did proper training with them. And we'll talk about in the next slide exactly what that consisted of. But we really want to measure that the people who are receiving these services are getting what they bargained for. And so, again, that is all done through SurveyMonkey, and then our evaluator sends us a report every 6 months. We should be getting our first report because this program started in March, so we should be getting our first report at the end of this month from our evaluator with the survey results. So we're really looking forward to see how the people who are using the vouchers really received them and if they got what they wanted out of them. So in order to train the attorneys that are participating in our program, we developed a continuing legal education course, and we partnered with the Elder Law section of the Delaware Bar Association, the Community Legal Aid of Delaware, Delaware Volunteer Legal Services, and the Alzheimer's Association Delaware Valley Chapter. We held a full-day program at the Widener University Delaware Law School in January 2017, so earlier this year. And Widener University is the only law school in Delaware, so it was a natural choice to go there because we knew that we would have the right space and they could help us promote the program to the attorneys, not just that are part of the Elder Law section, but the whole Delaware Bar. So we included substantive and ethics credits for free for the attorneys in both Pennsylvania and Delaware because we are so close to Pennsylvania. We're 5 minutes over the line if you were at the law school. But it was open to any professional who wanted to attend because a lot of the subjects that we covered in the continuing legal education course really are for any professional. So we talked about not only, the things that Patty spoke to you about a little bit earlier, but we also talked about a lot of the resources that are available, the Alzheimer's Disease Initiative as a whole, as well as Alzheimer's disease in general. So we left it open. We had professors come. We had a lot of students also attend, which was really nice. We had people from the Attorney General's office, as well as the Public Defender's office, and a whole myriad of people. So it was a very successful day, I would say. We videotaped the program. Patty did a wonderful job doing that, so that attorneys could view it in the future. And we're working with the Delaware Bar Association now to get it online in their bank of online continuing legal education courses so that people can just log on and view it and get credits for it in the future. Attorneys who completed the CLE were designated as dementia-friendly attorneys and can participate in our legal voucher program. I also want to mention that we met with the American Bar Association while we were planning this CLE in order to gather ideas from them, and this is something that was really helpful for us because we got a lot of ideas of what is happening nationally in this area that we could incorporate in our day here in Delaware. We also printed all materials ahead of time and sent them out to participants so that they could review them before coming to the continuing legal education course. So what is a dementia-friendly attorney? These are attorneys that can identify people with Alzheimer's disease or related dementias, assess capacity on a periodic basis of their clients, know services that are available to help the person with ADRD and their caregivers, and then provide information and referrals to other services that are dementia-friendly. And this last point was really important for us because we have been doing a lot around dementia in Delaware. We have a state plan on addressing Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, and we wanted to make sure that that knowledge was transferred not only to us working in the division and our contractors, but also the attorneys, because even once this project ends, we want that knowledge to continue, and that way it's sustainable. So people will be referred, even if they're not coming in with a voucher, but they have dementia, they'll be referred to our division and all the other supports that we have around the state of Delaware, which is a lot. So we are really excited to share that information with the attorneys. So these are some of the topics that were covered during our full day of the continuing legal education course. We had a doctor from Swank Memory Care, which is the only memory care facility in the state of Delaware, talk about diagnosis and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. A representative from the Alzheimer's Association spoke about the activities of the Alzheimer's Association, their resources and services, as well as how it affects families. I spoke about the Alzheimer's Disease Initiative and the Legal Voucher Program and shared that knowledge of the services available within our own division to the attorneys. We had a professor talk about planning for incapacity, and then we also had the public guardian speak about ethical issues in capacity. I skipped over the presentation that I actually thought was the most important presentation, which was Tom Brophy. He is someone living with Alzheimer's disease. He is in his 50s, and he was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's disease. And he gave us personal reflections on the importance of legal planning. And I would say that that was probably the most impactful part of our day because the attorneys got to hear from a person who has done all the right things when it comes to legal planning. When he was diagnosed, he and his wife immediately met with an attorney and discussed everything that needed to be put in order. And so he went through that process and what it felt like, and then his wife spoke and talked about what it meant for her. And so that was really important to hear it from someone who's actually had the services. And so if you were thinking of doing a continuing legal education course, I definitely would reach out to someone who's living with the disease that can help explain it to the attorneys. It really put a face to what is happening to these individuals. And we were given Tom Brophy's name. He was recommended to us by the Alzheimer's Association. He's on their speakers bureau. So a lot of the Alzheimer's Association chapters throughout the nation have speakers bureaus. So I highly suggest reaching out to them. So we had 44 people attend the full day of the continuing legal education course. And of those, 18 attorneys agreed to take part in the legal voucher program. And as I mentioned before, all 3 counties have multiple attorneys for people to meet with. The reason why all 44 attorneys did not sign up to participate because some of them can't. If they're a low-income legal provider, if they're through the Attorney General's office or a public guardian, they're not qualified to participate because they're already providing some of those services as it is. So everyone that participated in the CLE were given a pre- and post survey, and there's a couple things that we learned. There is a need for another CLE on Medicaid. There's a ton of questions related to Medicaid, especially in Delaware, and especially with some of the cuts that may be happening to Medicaid. And so while we couldn't answer all of those questions, it's something that we want to address in the future. We also learned that hearing from someone, as I said before, an actual person with Alzheimer's, help the attorneys relate to the law, relate the law to the clients. And I just want to point out the picture. That's from our CLE, and one of the most lively discussions that we had during the CLE was medical capacity versus legal capacity. And you heard from Patty earlier that sometimes it can be rather confusing to people. And so we had a very lively discussion about that. So next steps in the legal voucher program. So as I said, the program started around March, and we are actively soliciting participation. We did have a challenge getting some of our providers to commit to the program and share it with eligible participants, but every couple of weeks we kind of reevaluate how we're promoting the program, and we've done a lot in terms of social media. We've identified champions within our own division, and I've kind of gone on a road show talking about the legal voucher program. I think with any new program, people are sometimes slow to take to it, so we're starting to really get moving with the program, and we think it's going to be very, very successful in the very near future. The program itself ends August 31st, 2018, with the last vouchers given out 3 months prior to that, which would be May 31st, to allow for people to actually use the vouchers. And we are planning another CLE focused on Medicaid for 2018 because that's something that the attorneys wanted to do. So we are actually going to have the elder law section really take the lead in that this time around because it can focus on other things, not just dementia. And so we'll just be consulting with them at that point. So that is our program, and this is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. And now I am going to hand it over to Stephanie, who is going to talk about the Consumer Planning Guide.
Thanks, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Hughes, and I work at the National Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Center at RTI International. And I'm going to share with you today a new series of consumer guides that we've developed to help educate people with dementia on advanced planning issues. Our Resource Center developed these guides in partnership with the American Bar Association's Commission on Law and Aging, and we're supported by the Administration on Community Living. So as we started looking at this topic at the Resource Center, what we found is that even though advanced planning has a lot of importance for people living with dementia, there aren't many advanced planning resources that are tailored to them, similar to what Patty and Julia were just alluding to. So our goal in developing these guides was to create materials that someone in the early stages of dementia could read and understand. We also wanted to be able to emphasize some of the advanced planning issues that are particularly relevant to people with dementia, and I'll get into some of those specifics in a moment. So one of the first decisions that we made when deciding to develop these guides was to break the material up into 4 separate guides so that the length of each would be manageable. The first guide is about financial planning, and as some of you may know, managing daily finances can become challenging even in the really early stages of dementia. So this guide looks at some of the ways that people with dementia can simplify the management of their money and also emphasizes the importance of creating a power of attorney to name someone to manage their finances when they're no longer able to. The second guide is about health care, and that guide looks at the importance of having ongoing conversations with family members and healthcare providers about your wishes for the future, getting those wishes documented in writing, and also naming someone in writing as a healthcare agent, again through a healthcare power of attorney to make decisions for you. The third guide looks at some of the fact that most people with dementia will need some increase in care over time and looks at the basics of care planning, including the kinds of home care, day services, and residential options that are available, as well as some of the basics of the ways of paying for these services. And finally, the fourth guide is about the topic of making health and financial decisions for someone with dementia. So this is the only one of the guides that was specifically targeted to family members rather than people with dementia. And again, similar to what Patty was talking about earlier, we really wanted to emphasize the importance of continuing to involve the person with dementia in decisions as much as possible. We also cover in that guide some tips on how to make responsible decisions about someone else's money and health, and how to navigate some of the challenges that can come up when other family members are involved. So because the information about advanced planning can be really complex and involve legal jargon, we had to think really carefully about how to tailor the content and design of these guides. And we worked really closely with both the team at the American Bar Association and our RTI publication staff on this process. One of the ways that we simplified the material was to really try to focus in on only a couple of key points or takeaway messages for each guide. And the ABA team was really critical in helping us to refine what the core content should be and in reviewing the language closely to make sure that it was accurate. We went through a lot of rounds of revisions, and after initially creating our first drafts with a lot of really detailed information, we basically translated those drafts into plain language, meaning that we simplified the vocabulary that was used. We made sure we were using active voice, shortened sentences. We eliminated pronouns as much as possible and aimed at getting the language to a 7th to 8th grade reading level. We also looked at the design of the guides, the visuals, and our designers worked to try to minimize the amount of text on each page, build in plenty of white space, include sufficient color contrast and large font size so that it would be readable for someone with low vision or vision impairment. And all of the guides went through the 508 compliance process. We spent quite a bit of time thinking about the images that we would use in these guides. And what our design team found as they were researching this is that for people with cognitive impairment, a storytelling approach can be more effective than using icons or photos. So our designers actually created the comic illustrations like the one that you see here and on the previous slides that are aimed at kind of helping to walk the reader through the material sequentially and depicting very clearly the specific topics that are being explained. So these guides did recently become available. They're on the ACL website at the link that is shown here. They're free for anyone to use. We really encourage you to take a look at them and make use of them. They can be printed or, oops, somehow went back to the previous slide. They can be printed or shared electronically. There are some links to additional resources within the guides. Again, we really looked at limiting the resources that we included, but we wanted to be able to point people to some additional sources of information that would be helpful to them. So I want to be sure to leave plenty of time for questions here, but I've provided my contact information. If you want to learn more about the guides, feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Julie, Patty, and Stephanie, for your great presentations. We do have some questions that already came in, and I'll get to those in just a minute. If you have not submitted a question, please feel free to do so in the question and answer section of the webinar platform on your screen. So let's see here. Let's start with some questions. Julie and Patty, can you talk a little bit about how often an eligible person can get a voucher? Is it once in a lifetime, once a year? And also how many legal service vouchers you have in total that you can provide?
Sure, no problem. So this is Julie, and we have about, I would say, just over 200 vouchers available per year for 2 years. So we're almost done the first year and moving on to the second year. And as far as how many vouchers people can get, they get their initial voucher, when they go to the Caregiver Resource Center, and then they would call the attorney and say, you know, I have a voucher where their caregiver can call the attorney, and the attorneys are all aware of the program. If they require additional services, so once they meet with the attorney, if they need more time with the attorney, there's 3 different routes that they can take. If they are low income and meet the income threshold for low income legal providers, we have 3 in the state, including community legal aid, they can use their services to accomplish their needs. If they can privately pay for the services with the attorney that they're seeing, they can privately pay. But they can also have the attorney call Patty, because she is our legal services developer, and request additional vouchers. And we have not spent all 200 or so vouchers this year, so we have additional vouchers. So we are more than willing, if people need further assistance with the attorney, to give out those vouchers to them. We haven't seen that happen yet, but we have made it as an option. And I also failed to mention that if someone already has a power of attorney or guardianship over an individual who has dementia, they can still go to the attorney as the power of attorney or guardian. And so that's also available for a voucher.
Great, thank you so much. Can you talk a little bit about if the Caregiver Resource Center can assist the person with determining what legal assistance may be needed and how to use the attorney time and, you know, to use the attorney time most effectively?
Sure. So our Caregiver Resource Centers probably would not be in the best position to do any kind of counseling around what type of legal assistance would be needed because they are staffed by volunteers or part-time individuals. However, we have made it clear on the type of legal needs. So if they are talking to a caregiver or a person with dementia who brings up that, you know, I don't have a will or I don't have anything in place once I lose capacity, you know, they can point them in the direction of the legal voucher program. We've worked with the attorneys through the CLE to talk about how best to use your time. And so they're not meeting with the paralegal, they're meeting with the actual attorney when they go to see them, and they're getting down to business because we want that hour, hour and a half that they're seeing them to be really constructive. So, you know, people usually are going in, from what we've seen so far, with a specific legal goal in mind, whether, you know, we've seen a lot of wills, we've seen a lot of setting up power of attorneys, things like that. Medicaid help we've seen a little bit of. So most people just can't afford to hire an attorney themselves, which is what we're finding out, and that's why they're coming to the Caregiver Resource Centers to see how they can help, and we have the Legal Voucher Program to do so.
Great, thank you so much. Can you talk a little bit about any of the challenges that the attorneys encountered when working with the voucher program so far?
Sure. So I was just asking Patty if any of the attorneys have contacted her because she is the main contact for the program. And none have reached out to her with any challenges working with people. I think one of the challenges that we know does happen is if caregiver and, say, a parent who has Alzheimer's disease goes to see the attorney, the caregiver, even though that they don't have power of attorney yet or anything like that, is trying to make the legal decisions. But the person with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia is the client, and that's who the attorney has to talk to. And so there's been a little bit of conflict, we know, with that, but our attorneys are very good at kind of sussing that out, talking with the caregiver about, you know, the person with Alzheimer's disease as the client.
Okay. There were a few questions about other states that are planning or have in place similar voucher programs. Are you aware of any other states that have similar programs?
We are not, and when we talked to the American Bar Association about our program and building it, I don't think they were aware of any either.
Okay, and how about you? I think you mentioned a state with supported decision-making option. Do you know which state that was?
Yes, that was Texas, in fact, had the first legislation enacted on that one. But when we did actually when I assisted with writing that legislation, Lexi McPassel, the public guardian, and myself did a lot of research and actually found stuff out of the United States, Yukon and Australia and other locations that had done a lot of work on this topic. So we took that as well as what Texas had already in place and kind of formulated what Delaware and what would work best for Delaware.
Great, thanks. Have you had any other states, either their Health and Human Service departments or others, contact you for setting up similar models? And do you have materials that you would be able to share to assist other states if they did contact you?
Yeah, no other states that I'm aware of have contacted us, but we would be happy to share any of our materials, from marketing to how we set it up. We have a scope of work and specifications for the program. We'd be happy to share it with anybody who contacted us.
Great. Let's see. Can you talk a little bit about what a supporter is? Is that the same as a patient advocate or a healthcare proxy?
Yes, I can definitely address that. And supporter, when we talk about the supported decision making, is someone the adult recognizes that they trust to assist them in making decisions. So that individual may just have trouble, like many of us may have, going to a doctor's office and understanding all the ins and outs of what the doctor is telling us about whatever procedure, medication may be coming along. So that person can then assist them in understanding exactly what needs to be done, how to take the medication, what are the repercussions of that in that type of situation. So there could be anybody except for who is restricted by the legislation that the individual would trust to assist them in getting information. We focused initially when we were first looking at this topic of medical and how you go to the doctor's office and help someone make decisions, because doctors would often say, hey, this individual doesn't understand what I'm saying, even though they may not be breaking it down into the most simplest terms that that individual could understand. And they say, well, you can't understand what's going to happen, so you must not have capacity to make decisions, when that could be the farthest thing from the truth. The person may just need someone else to assist them in understanding it so they can make the best decision. And in fact, it could be a way where the person maybe just couldn't communicate back to the doctor that they understand and what their decision is. It could be just simply a communication barrier. So in that regard, the supporter can be someone that the adult has designated as someone they trust and enter into an agreement where they assist them in making the decision that is best for them. Again, we stress that the individual, the adult, making this agreement retains all rights and authority of making decisions. The supporter does not have any rights to make decisions for that individual. They are there simply to assist the individual understand what's going to happen and let them make the decision that's best for them.
Great, thank you so much. We have a few, you talked a little bit about in your training that you talked about the attorneys being able to look into decisional capacity. Did you provide like a standardized tool for the attorneys, or are they all doing it in the way that works best for them? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So we had a whole entire presentation dedicated to capacity. Our public guardian for the state actually did it. And the capacity spectrum that we provided in this PowerPoint and that Patty talked about, that's one of the tools that we gave all the attorneys. Most of them already had it. I think some of the issues that we talked about in the discussion related to medical capacity versus legal capacity was when doctors tried to interfere on some of the legal tools. So they would say they don't have capacity, but in reality they did, because legal capacity is different from medical capacity. And if that's something that your state is struggling with, we'd be happy to share the presentation that we had. It's based on Delaware case law, so you'll see a lot of case law in there and cases from the past that's part of Delaware system, but legal capacity and medical capacity is very, their perspectives are the same in any state. So I think that you would be able to get a good idea of how the public guardian worked and explained it to our attorneys. And hold on, Patty has something to add to that.
Just wanted to say that when we were developing the capacity spectrum, we tried to break it down to make it the most as simple and as easy as an at-a-glance kind of guide as to when you were looking at it, as well as to stress that there is a spectrum. So that is why we broke it down and tried to color code it to make it easy for everybody, no matter what your level of skill, whether you're an attorney or a medical provider or just a layman who's out there who doesn't understand this. And it is a very complicated topic, so that you could see where areas where, you've got no impairment, you can make decisions whatever they are, good or bad. But then as you look at impairment affecting capacity, to stress that there can be impairment, but people still have the right to make decisions until they can no longer understand the nature and effect of those decisions. So that's one of the reasons we have this spectrum, to try and stress that capacity is not you've got it one day, you lose it the next based on just a diagnosis of Alzheimer's.
Thank you. We have a few questions also about how the attorneys who work with this program are reimbursed. Is there a contract in place? Is there a simple billing process? If someone wants to, replicate this, do you like the model that you've been using?
Yeah, we do like the model that we are using. We anticipated that we would have a lot of attorneys participate, so we don't have a contract with all the different attorneys. We actually are working through the Caregiver Resource Centers. So the attorneys bill the Caregiver Resource Centers to reimburse them, and then quarterly the Caregiver Resource Centers, who we already have contracts with, will invoice us for those costs, as well as their administrative costs for the program as well, and then we pay it quarterly. So it's worked really well for us, because instead of 18 attorneys, we're working with six different agencies to do that.
Thanks so much on that answer. Let's see. We have a question about if a person has moderate to severe symptoms of dementia, is it possible to have an advance directive completed? If not, are there any solutions or other resources that can be used?
Yes, this is Patty. In fact, yes, as I've tried to make as clear as we can, because it is a very complicated topic, and if you say someone's got, not just early stage dementia, but they have many other symptoms with that disease, that we look at each case individually, and again, look at each individual individually, as well as what they want to execute in regards to a document. So that is one of the reasons the attorneys are so important, and doctors as well, to get an understanding of what that person can understand at the time of signing such documents. And then we want to be clear that the signing of such things, you can have significant impairment and still be able to sign legal documents such as advanced health care directive and a power of attorney, but as long as they know, have an understanding of the nature and effect of that document. If they can show that to even at the most minimalist degree, then they have every right to sign that document and make it effective at that time.
Great, thank you. Have you had any situations where there's no family or friends available to assist with planning? And if so, what other professional can be offered to those folks?
We absolutely have that situation in our state. As I mentioned in our presentation, we have a lot of retirees moving into the state who don't have a caregiver that's close by. So they might have one that lives across the country or, not within driving distance. So our division has specifically for people with Alzheimer's nurse navigators, and we have one in the upper part of our state and one in the lower part of our state, and that nurse navigator really helps the individual with Alzheimer's or related dementia navigate all the different resources and services that are available, the legal voucher program being one of them. So they're there to help them, and they are the professional in our state that really is there to help them navigate. In addition, our caregiver resource centers do a little bit of case management as well, and so depending on which of the caregiver resource centers it is, they're also there to help them and support them in these kind of decision-making services.
Great, thank you. And then if someone specifically from Delaware was asking if there's a list of the attorneys who are involved in this legal voucher program, and if so, is there a list available to the public?
Right now we don't have a list available publicly. It's in the works to be put on our website. We have on our division's website, we have a Alzheimer's toolkit that talks about a lot of our services, and we were planning on putting the list of attorneys on that site. So we're still going to be doing that. We just wanted to firm up all of the attorneys, and now we have all 18 attorneys confirmed and trained, so we'll be putting it up on that site. So stay tuned.
Great, thank you so much. So I think that we have reached the end of our ability to answer questions. Steve has a few final remarks, but I want to thank all three of our presenters for taking the time out of their schedules to put together these presentations and provide such helpful information to our audience today. And thank you to all of you for participating, those of you that are on the webinar. And I will turn things over to Steve for some final comments.